everybody. This is Prospering in the Geo-Economy. And as we put this together, I got to thinking, I used to work for a major multinational that spent $500,000 on a market strategy back in 1990. And it said that health, nanotechnology, geotechnology, and biotechnology were going to be the big growth areas. They didn't heed their own report, and they no longer exist. And I'm here. Now, you may ask what the geoeconomy is. Well, the geoeconomy is basically geotechnologies that are driven and dependent on information systems. And this session is going to open your eyes and let you talk a little bit, and we hope cause you to think a little bit about the new models and how you can prosper in this economy. It requires market-driven, the identification of markets driven by time and place, or why, where matters when. Now, we designed this session to fit with the clean tech area and other things that are going on here, because what you're going to find from these speakers is that you may think they're three diverse areas, but they're really not. You can connect the dots from one to the other. And that's really what the secret is in prospering in the geoeconomy. So to kick things off, I will introduce you to a friend of mine for 20 plus years, Dr. Ron Freedman. Ron is the co-founder of the Impact Group. He publishes Research Money, and he also is the CEO of the Innovation Atlas. Ron?
Thanks, Richard. Good afternoon. No, please don't. Save your applause till the end if you're still in that mood. Yes, as Richard said, we go back for many, many years. I think we met when we were, 20 years ago? So you were 5, I was 6. Yeah. A great pleasure for me to be here today, and especially at Richard's invitation. For those of you who don't know him, he's really one of the forward-looking folks in the OCE system, and he sees trends developing long before other people do, and I really take my hat off to him for organizing today's session and trying to get this whole notion of the geo-economy going. So thanks for inviting me here today, Richard. Oh, and by the way, he knows some great chocolate makers. So let me start by introducing our panel. On my far right, on your left, is Dr. Bob Ryerson. Bob has a really distinguished career in this whole remote sensing GIS business. He's been, at the moment, he's the CEO of Geomatics, and I didn't ask you what Geomatics stands for. Is it named after your wife or something? No?
Daughter.
I was close. Okay. He's been in the government. He's been a real scientist, and when he left government, he was Director General at Canada Centre for Remote Sensing. So he knows the whole remote sensing business and GIS business inside out. He's been a consultant to many of the big aerospace companies in the world, to international organizations like the UN, the World Bank, and various government agencies. And he and a colleague of his, Stan Arnoff, has just published a book, Why, Where Matters, and I think you have a copy of the brochure on your seat. So I'm sure Bob would love to have some orders for Why, Where Matters. And you'll see that you can order that online.
Reading for everybody.
So Bob, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Next we have Dr. Ben Myers on my far right here, who is the Senior Director of Emerging Technologies at a company called Intelligent Mechatronic Systems. And among other things, what they're doing is developing technologies for smart cars, or at least what I would call smart cars. I think not unlike the Google cars that we've been reading about lately, which are autonomously driven cars, but that's just a small element of the kinds of technologies that he's trying to integrate into the vehicle of the future. So welcome, Ben. And in the middle, next to Ben, is Richard Wunderlich, who's the Vice President of Energy and Utilities at Siemens. Now, most of you will know the name Siemens, one of the largest, most successful, most advanced engineering companies in the world. I was just asking him what they're doing in Ontario in terms of research and development, and they're starting to invest heavily here in the province. One of their particular areas of interest is smart grid, with the idea of providing utilities with an end-to-end solution from a single source. I think those of you who are following the alternative energy movement will know that one of the big issues is how do you connect all of these various suppliers, small-scale suppliers which are constantly going off and on and up and down, and make a useful and effective system. So it includes a wide range of technologies for industrial, commercial, and residential power users. Is into the transportation sector, vehicle propulsion for the charging infrastructure, that is actually attaching your vehicle to the infrastructure and getting charge and distributing charge. Electrical distribution issues, conventional and renewable generation, and distributed energy resources. So thanks to all of our panelists for taking their time and being with us today. Before I give them a chance to speak, though, I want to give you a brief introduction to our own interest in the area of GIS systems and the geo-economy. What you're looking at here is our reasonably new product called the Innovation Atlas of Canada. And what we're doing is using essentially a form of GIS technology to show what's happening on the research and innovation scene in Canada. So essentially, we're taking statistical information and localizing it so people can understand what's happening in their community. Here's a small example. If you want to know how many businesses are conducting research in different parts of the country, we can show that to you. Here's an example at the provincial level. You can see that the R&D businesses in Ontario employ among them about 71,000 people working on research. That's the R&D pool in the private sector in Ontario. And we could localize that to any province or region, or even right down to the city level and sometimes down to the sub-city level. So you've got this notion of companies doing research around Ontario, around Canada. It's important to know how many companies are doing research. It's also important to know how much money they're spending on research. So what you're looking at now is a map or charts and tables at a local level showing you the total business spending on research in different parts of the country between 2005 and 2009. And what you see right away is that in a number of places, the actual spending is going down dramatically, whereas in other places, like Kitchener-Waterloo, the spending is going up. I'll give you another example of how we use GIS systems on the Innovation Atlas. One of the things that we have done is taken all the grants and contributions databases from the 3 major national granting agencies and mash them together into a searchable database where you can search by just any keyword that you're interested in. So here I've given you the example of nanotechnology. I've asked the Atlas to show me how many nanotechnology projects, how many nanotech research projects are ongoing in Ontario. This would have been in 2010. We're just in the process of updating that database. So here's some of the data here. For example, this fellow at University of Western is working on default tolerant design techniques for nanotechnology integrated something or other. So that's how we find experts at a local level. What you're looking at now is our database of high-tech companies. We have a database of 58,000 companies, 30,000 manufacturing companies, 28,000 service companies working in selected technology-oriented sectors. So here what I've asked the Atlas to do is show me all of the companies in the Greater Toronto area who are working on electronic systems and parts. And you can see them on the map here, and here you can actually see a database of all of the companies which you could download and create a contact system. Each of these companies, well, here's a good example. Apollo Circuits is manufacturing printed circuit boards. Their industry sector is electronic systems and parts. They have a NAICS code, North American Industrial Classification System. So if this NAICS code appeals to you, you can take the NAICS code, plug it into our dialog box, and search for all the companies that correspond to that NAICS code. So this is all to say that at our company, we're very well aware of the importance of knowing who's doing what where and being able to tie economic activities, in this case, and research activities to specific locations. So that's our contribution to this whole discussion on why place matters, why where matters. So I'm going to turn it over now to our first speaker, who is going to be Well, I don't know. Who wants to go first?
Me.
Bob is going to go first. Okay. Bob Ryerson. Over to you, Bob.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to change the focus a little bit here. I'm going to talk in generalities. We came up with the term geo-economy to describe what we consider to be the economy we are now in. It's an economy that is driven by and dependent upon geographic information. And my co-author, Stan Aronoff, co-author of the book, the material on the seats. So we will dispense with the outline very quickly. I'm going to talk about what the geoeconomy is. I'm going to talk about how we got there. And I'm going to talk about the societal impacts of geospatial technologies and information. I think it'll be quite illuminating. The geoeconomy is dependent upon and driven by geographic information. Now, if you think of the historic past, when hunter and gatherer societies, if you did not know your local geography, you didn't know where the food was, you didn't know where the water was, and you died. It's pretty fundamental. Today, however, we have a lot better geographic information. We all have access to information that only 15, 20 years ago was only available to people either in large corporations or banks or those wonderful geographers who worked hidden away in government, all those people who have since been laid off. We talk about geo-luck. If you were fortunate enough to have resources in your environment, you lived and you did okay. You know, the people living in Fiji had the food falling off the trees and the fish in the ocean and so on. But if you weren't quite so lucky, like the people on the dry side of this photograph, well, then you had a little bit more of difficulty surviving. And we have another term called geo-advantage. Geo-luck, those with access to abundant local resources were lucky. But now you have the possibility of having the geo-advantage. Those who know how to obtain, access, and use geographic information have a significant advantage over those who do not. And I can describe, and in the book we go after example after example after example. Consider, for example, Eaton's. How many people remember Eaton's? Eaton's, famous department store, right? Not there anymore. Why? Well, they didn't customize their business to the local economy and what people wanted. Now, this may be considered to be a very sexist remark, but ladies and gentlemen, ladies in Montreal and Toronto do not wear the same clothes as the ladies in Moose Jaw, Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg. They tried to sell the same product everywhere and they did not succeed. You have to take a geo-advantage. Now, what has changed? Well, location is seen as a way to organize information. There's also been convergence on a number of axes, and we'll go over the convergence in these axes. Oh, that was hard on the hearing aid. We have information convergence. Location is a way to integrate information, and as a result, we have spatial data infrastructures, a way of organizing geographic data. Think of atlases. We have technology convergence. We have cheaper and faster processors, storage devices, communications. We have better sensors. We have all kind of increased interoperability. My little BlackBerry device can tell me exactly where I am. We have improved security. We have all kinds of things happening now that, from a technology point of view, have allowed this new economy to flourish. We also have discipline convergence. We have different disciplines are using the same technology and using location as a common reference point. Take into consideration the oil sands. Geographic information is used by the environmental people. It's used by the people who are looking at how to extract the oil. It's used by the engineering people. It's used by planners. It's used by all kinds of people. Same information used for different purposes. Silos are breaking down between different disciplines, and that is very important as well. And we see different disciplines working together. Now, we also have policy convergence. Now, why is it important to us? Well, the same policy issues are important everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. And geographic information is needed to address all of these policy issues. It's a simple fact. But geospatial information, or geomatics, it has changed the way we think. It's changed the way we think about what's around us. And I'll go through some of these examples in a few minutes. It's also changed how we make decisions and what decisions we take. It has transformed and changed our infrastructure. And by changing our infrastructure, geographic information is actually changing our whole society. And I'll show some of these examples. Policy issues, security. Well, whether it was World War I, World War II, the Cuban Missile Crisis, or the Gulf War. Obviously, in security, geospatial information is important. Emergency response, flooding, the use of radar data, and so on, for insurance purposes and other issues. Sovereignty. I love this old photograph of the Canadian-US border. That's why it's on the front of our brochure. Responsible resource management. This is an example of the applications of spatial data remote sensing in Thailand. Apologies to my panelists here because they can't read a word on it, but that's okay. It's only meant to be there very quickly. Natural resource management requires all kinds of spatial information about the ecosystem, whether it's for forestry, land use planning. All of these topics require, indeed they demand, geospatial data. Crop monitoring, whether it's for insurance claims, famine relief, it doesn't matter, you need geospatial information for all kinds of agricultural purposes. For precision agriculture, which is a topic some of the people here are talking about, to have more effective application of fertilizer and so on. Lowers costs, higher yields. Forest management enables more sustainable and predictable production, for example, with climate change. I have a son who's doing a master's in forestry and looking at exactly this kind of problem, and not surprisingly, he's using geographic information systems. All kinds of applications, and basically the objective is the same. Lower costs, increased productivity, maintain sustainability. Education and healthcare. Think school bus routing. Healthcare, predicting where the virus is going to be hitting next. Climate change monitoring. What used to be a glacier is today a fjord. Environmental monitoring, whether you're looking at Brazil or some other place. Government transparency. This bright red spot that you see on the image, that is the melting down of the Chernobyl reactor. There is nowhere to hide. It was obvious. This was a meltdown. This is a serious problem seen by a civilian satellite. Now, I love this image. This map showing the little red circles. Now, you will all recall when President Obama and Secretary Clinton took office, they were anti oil sands. And they did terrible, bad stuff, awful, bad. The government of Canada, National Atlas, prepared this map that showed the carbon emissions of all of the states in the United States. There are 22 states in the United States with higher carbon emissions than the oil sands in Alberta. All of a sudden, they didn't dislike it anymore. They were more pro-oil sands. It's amazing that one simple map can change the viewpoints of two of the most powerful people in the world. Think about that. Investment convergence. Now, this is really cool because people like the Google folks have seen value in geospatial information that those of us in the geospatial world didn't see. And there has been convergence in the investment world. More profitable business models, making more money, making billions of dollars, in fact. The whole application of remote sensing to geospatial data, and usually what I do at these meetings is I pull out a copy of the $100 bill and I pass it around, but in this audience, I'm not sure I'll do that today. No. But we have estimated the value of geospatial information to Canada is between $9.5 and $19 billion a year. It's incredible, the value of geospatial information. Now, why have there been all these impacts? Well, we are basically a visual species. We like visual information. And geospatial information allows us to understand things in a way that other information doesn't. We understand and it communicates to us. And by communicating this information, it influences decision making. It influences behavior, it influences policy. And that's, I think, very, very important. Geospatial data contain easily used information. That's the bottom line, really. And the younger people expect, not only expect, they demand to have geospatial information in everything they use. Now, in transforming its infrastructure, as I've said, we are transforming society. And it also shifts the distribution of power. Who controls the geospatial data has a certain degree of power. It's changed our expectations. I know if I call 911, an ambulance will arrive within 3 to 5 minutes at my house at 5038. We have a competitive advantage with geospatial information. Knowledge is power, whether it's assessing the industrial capabilities and what's going on in this industrial complex, whether it's for military purposes or simply precision agriculture looking at wine grapes in southern Ontario. In conclusion, geospatial data, well, if there's global use and that promotes global competition. So we are in a globally competitive environment, as was mentioned today in the discussion about the entrepreneurs and the CEOs. Geospatial data is required to address key policy and business issues, and these issues are global in nature. It has had and will continue to have important societal impacts, and geospatial data are a critical component of the evolving geoeconomy. And in the geoeconomy, success requires the effective, intelligent application and use of geospatial information and technology. And if you don't invest in geospatial information and technology, you will fail. Whether you are a company, whether you are an industry, or whether you are an individual, because individuals increasingly have both the ability and access to the information that allows you to make better decisions about your world and how you live in it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. There'll be an opportunity at the end to ask questions of all of our panelists.
I'll just take that out of your way.
So, next up I'm going to invite Ben Miners to talk to us about what he's doing in the transportation sector. Ben?
Do you want a glass of water?
No, I'm okay, thanks. Thank you. I'm going to dive into a topic a little more narrowly focused. The vehicle. It's something we spend a growing amount of time in our everyday lives. It's something that some people consider it the third most important place in our lives. You know, we spend a lot of our time at home, we spend a lot of time at work. What about all the time we spend in the car? What can we access? What can we do with it? I work at a company called IMS, and where we make vehicles safer, smarter, and greener. And a big part of this is leveraging location, leveraging positional information, leveraging information about the vehicle, about the driver, about the traveler, where they're traveling, how they're traveling, when they're traveling. Taking all that information and incorporating it into meaningful feedback, into information that can help improve the life of that individual, improve the environment around that individual, and improve the health and welfare of everyone on the road. Leveraging that location information for not only the vehicle but the traveler themselves expands beyond that car to also encompass insurance companies, infrastructure, automotive OEMs. Imagine if an automotive manufacturer could realize exactly where all their vehicles were deployed, exactly how those vehicles were being utilized. Not just, yes, that vehicle was sold in this city at this time, but 2 years from now. Imagine the wealth of information that could be collected by understanding the full path through the full life cycle of those vehicles as they travel through our society, as you drive them through our society. There's 3 main areas that I touched on briefly. One is a machine-to-machine link. This is the link that connects the vehicle to the infrastructure around it. This is the link that connects location information, whether it's from the vehicle your phone, or elsewhere to describe where that vehicle is traveling. The second big element is the interface, the human-machine interface. Once you have location information, how can you take that and turn it into something meaningful, something that can be delivered back to the traveler, back to the driver, or to the interested party? And context, looking beyond the vehicle. What can be learned not only within the vehicle, but what's around it? And how can that be all pulled together to deliver context-relevant information to the traveler? This information allows us to gain precise insights about the traveler, about the trip, about the vehicle. And this can all be used for proactive maintenance. No longer do you need to bring your vehicle in after 4,000, 5,000 kilometers or after 3 months. If you know exactly how it was driven and where it was driven, now you might have a precise measurement as to when you should bring it in for service, or when you should have that oil changed, or what part of that vehicle could be damaged because of where you're driving it. Safety and security. I know there's a really good mention around 911. Well, there are many initiatives out there for emergency services within the vehicle. Imagine your vehicle breaks down and emergency services come up right beside you without you even needing to call 911. The information is there. It's just a matter of leveraging it, a matter of exploiting it, and a matter of making sure that it's communicated to the right parties. I'm going to touch on 4 challenges here and dive into these in a little more depth. One is extracting the information in a practical manner. The second one is leveraging appropriate technologies at the right time. Looking beyond the vehicle, bringing context in about where you are and what's around you. And then exploiting that to extract value, to extract prosperity, to really make this information worthwhile. I know many of you have seen these precision and accuracy. I'm bringing them up here again because even today, when people talk about location, unfortunately, the information, the metadata around that location is lost. I would argue, especially in a vehicle environment, capturing not only the location, but the information about the precision of that location. How ambiguous is it? How uncertain is it? How reliable is it? Is almost as important as the location itself. If that vehicle breaks down, and you know that they're in Toronto, here's the latitude, here's the longitude, well, great. What if your precision was plus or minus a kilometer? All of a sudden, your emergency response strategy becomes very, very different. So collecting not only the location, but the metadata around it is critical to make sure that that location information is useful and can be leveraged effectively. A corollary to this is what can be done if you know the location information is not precise enough for your needs. What can be done? There's a lot that can be done even without having that information. There are people today out there leveraging cell phone triangulation. There are people out there today leveraging location information, even with its uncertainty, for things such as road tolling, where some might believe you need lane-by-lane precise GPS information. There are business rules that can be constructed around positional information to leverage what we have today. Even if it's only 95% accurate within 3 or 4 meters, that's enough. It's all about capturing that metadata. It's all about capturing the location and the information to support it. In the vehicle environment, there are many other sensors and areas of information that can be collected to augment traditional GPS location information. Fortunately, there's a wealth of sensors within the vehicle, and there's a wealth of growing automotive technologies, many of which you could find out more about if you go visit the Automotive Parts and Manufacturing Association booth, if you get time. Technologies within the vehicle involve many areas, from built-in, from the OEM perspective, to aftermarket, plug-in dongles, to the cell phones that we bring with us every day. These aren't going away, and they're not converging. They're only growing. the proliferation of these technologies and tools within the vehicle will only grow over time. It's a matter of selecting the right one for the right approach. OEM solutions are amazing when it's seamless and when you're guaranteed to have a vehicle that's off the line, ready to go with the right technology in it. Plug-in solutions are ideal when you need a higher level of precision in GPS and a more modern technology that might be available from your vehicle after you bought it. Cell phone-based solutions, from a localization perspective, are helpful and present some interesting challenges around GPS precision. Often those phones are in your pocket, in your bag, or elsewhere, and if you're not out actually using them for navigation, extracting location information is a challenge. I mentioned we talk about inside the vehicle, outside the vehicle, and extracting value out of that. What about outside the vehicle? Many of these things, numbered on this slide, are areas that we've talked about probably for 2 years now. Imagine being able to go to the parking lot and find out exactly where your car is parked without needing to write it down on a sheet of paper before you left that parking lot. Imagine driving by a restaurant and finding out about what the specials are before you pull into the parking lot. These are all valuable solutions that exploit location information, that hinge on location information. Directed location-based services, advertisement delivery, remembering where your parking is. Even taking it to the next level, and I mentioned earlier, road tolling. Imagine taking where you've driven, the time, the distance, and the place that you've driven, and transforming that into an itemized bill at the end of the month. Imagine taking that and incorporating that with context around your vehicle. If you decide to drive when it's raining and there's black ice out there, perhaps your insurance premium should be slightly higher for the time that you chose to drive during that more dangerous time. Taking this information, the information about the context around you, where you've driven, the tolls that you may be billed on an itemized bill at the end of the month. Well, what good is all this unless it's communicated effectively to the driver? Taking the driver and actually putting them in the driver's seat to control this location information from within the vehicle or as they travel before they get into the vehicle is very important. This can come in many ways, from voice interfaces to interactive information. For example, where's Jen? I want to catch up. We have a meeting at 6. Connect me to her. Imagine your system knowing exactly where Jen is, knowing that she's driving, she's on her way home right now, and informing you, oh, she's in the car. Is it urgent? Would you like me to connect you right away? Imagine taking this. And you remember CB radios? Maybe? Right? Virtual CB radios. Imagine driving down the road and just taking your system and being able to communicate, but communicate with those around you in a physical proximity. These are things that can all be done with the technologies that exist today and exploit location information. Some of the other interesting applications include leveraging location information to improve graduated licensing. Imagine a graduated licensing program in which you're not graded based on a test, but you're graded based on a quantitative measure of exactly how you drove and how you improved your driving over that graduated licensing program, based on the roads that you traveled on, based on where you traveled, based on how you traveled.
Yeah.
Imagine a graduate licensing program that would ensure all graduates from the graduated licensing program would be guaranteed to have experience on highways, would be guaranteed to have experience on icy conditions, experience in winter conditions, experience on dirt roads. These are all possible by capturing and leveraging location information with the vehicle and keeping the driver in the loop.
1 minute.
Skip over some graphs here. Taking this information and transforming it into value is really important. And that can only be done with partners throughout the ecosystem, with open standards, with interfaces that are flexible and built on standardized technologies that we can all understand. So to quickly summarize, extracting useful information relies as much on the metadata, the surrounding information, as it does on the specific latitude and longitude, especially when it comes to the vehicle. Leveraging automotive-grade in-vehicle technologies with open standards and secure transports allows us to exploit and leverage the location information about the vehicle and the traveler for the maximum benefit of the traveler and those around them. Taking context, the conditions of the road, the conditions of the environment, into account is extremely important, especially when it comes to things like road tolling, when it comes to things like insurance, when it comes to things like graduated licensing or young drivers. There's a lot more than the data, and it does need to transform from data to information with the driver in the loop at all times. Thank you.
Hey. Thanks, Ben. After you. Thanks for that, Ben. In fact, I've got a real-world opportunity for you.
Great.
I was talking with a friend the other day who said to me, you know, we're into pothole season now. How does the city know where the potholes are, right? How do you know? You're sitting at City Hall, and how do you know where the potholes are? He said, I want to build a website where ordinary citizens can go on and say, hey, there's a pothole here. I said to him, you know, it seems like a lot of work, and you're depending on a lot of volunteer effort here. Surely there's a better way to do this. I said, the city has got a fleet traveling around every street every day of the week. Why not just put a G-force meter on the vehicle, and every time it runs over a pothole, it'll send a signal through its OnStar system back to City Hall saying, hey, there's a pothole here. And when it records enough hits on one spot, it'll know where the potholes are. There you go.
It's a perfect application.
5%, thank you. Okay, next, last but not least, is Richard Wunderlich from Siemens, who's going to talk to us about his take on why place matters.
So I think the intent is to really get an understanding about the opportunities, the potential, and we had a good overview and then a deep dive into the automotive space and really, in fact, a number of very compelling and interesting use cases. And the reality is, I think on a personal level, we all have to be motivated to think about what this means to us individually, what it means potentially for us as a province to get some leadership in it, because it's just the tip of the iceberg. While you went through probably, I think, about 40 use cases indirectly, right? It's just the tip of the iceberg. And the pothole sensor is just another new idea. Apparently we can use our iPhones or smartphones and report potholes. My kids right away informed me that that would be the next new game for them, and tell the city there's a pothole everywhere. So it's clearly an opportunity for innovation. From my perspective, why where matters in energy is at the very, very tip of the iceberg. It's just something that people are starting to understand. And I'm going to give everyone, hopefully, a very concise overview of some potentials and opportunity that we can all engage with. Now, this graphic isn't exactly coming up with the contrast I'd hoped for, but back to being geographically advantaged. What the graph here shows is that as time has passed, our quality of life is enhanced by the amount of energy that we've consumed. The trick is we've got to use our energy more effectively, more efficiently, and still enhance the quality of life. If you take a quick shot at that, you say, I like the quality of life I have today. The energy I use, convert all the energy that I use and compare it to somebody way back when, and I've got the energy access and at my disposal of a king in medieval times, right? So we've got to get better at that, and we've got to take advantage of our geographic location and do the right things and consider how to use our energy more effectively. The mega trends are pointing us into some interesting considerations, and the reality is the mega trends hit the whole world in one form or another equally, but also not equally. The average age worldwide is increasing from 26 to 38 years of age. There are still areas in the world, though, where the average life expectancy is under 60 years of age. Right? So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to impact it? What do we need to consider? The reality is that in the energy paradigm, in the electricity paradigm, everything is about to change. And this is a picture representing today's electricity system, something that was built about 100 years ago, and it's actually being built the same way it was even today as it was 100 years ago. Normally what happens is there's a large central generation facility. It's so large everybody knows where it is. Everyone knows where the electricity is coming from, and we map it out and bring it to our homes or our businesses, and those locations are pretty much fixed. They're built and they're known and they're done. The world we're heading to is going to be a dynamic energy grid. It's going to have energy flowing in both directions. And when it becomes dynamic, we actually have to consider that some of our consumption and in fact production is potentially going to be on the move in the grid. This is something today's grid has never considered. So location is going to actually make the difference potentially in understanding what location, where what is, or why where matters. I think that's a brilliant term, by the way. I've been using it for since we got introduced, and normally makes everybody do a double take. Why where matters? Does that actually make sense? Yeah, it actually makes a whole lot of sense, because if we don't know where the electrons are flowing from and to, in a dynamic grid that's going in both directions, the grid will actually simply collapse. It will collide the electrons. The physicality of the electrical grid will come to a stop. Normally that'll happen with some destruction of equipment, by the way. It doesn't just happen harmlessly. So there's this paradigm change, and while this paradigm change is going on, we're looking at sustainability. We want to increase the quality of our life, and we need to take into account that we need to enhance our energy efficiency. So what we're headed to is an understanding around fossil fuels coming, in one form or another to end of life. Electricity is going to become more and more important. The grid is going to become dynamic. And in end effect, we're going to become producing consumers. And a lot of people are saying, wow, that's pretty crazy. How are we going to individually become producing consumers? Technology for rooftop solar innovation is around the corner. There are companies out there that are just waiting for the last bit of innovation to enable the business case for rooftop solar on our homes to be realized within the next 7 to 10 years. The now emergence and penetration of electric vehicles, mobile generation and consumption points of energy, wanting to plug in everywhere, are going to bring in a new dynamic and a new potential for sustainability. The fact of the matter is that in the new grid paradigm, load will follow generation as we become ever more sensitive to the pricing of the energy, and a lot of the things that you were talking about enabling the vehicle sector with is also going to be required in the energy sector. And there are parallels in all of that. So it's kind of astounding when you think about it that hardly anybody knows about this. And the reflex that most people have when they hear about it is they think of Big Brother. They think of actually kind of global surveillance instead of global search. What we've got to do is harness that for the individual, the good, and enable customer choice and the efficiency optimization of the system so that our energy and our capabilities and finally our quality of life are enhanced. So now what do we do about it? How many people are familiar with hype cycles? Gartner really pioneered hype cycles. So it's kind of neat. So I'm going to talk to you about a hype cycle. How is the contrast of that for you guys? Is that a dark black curvy line? Okay, that's a hype cycle in its most generic form. What happens normally is there's a technology trigger. Something new comes out, everybody gets excited, something's made possible, and then a little bit later, and there's no time really here, it's all relative, there's a peak of inflated expectations where we're a little overhyped. We're a little overexcited about the possibility of the new innovation, and then we finally get it and we figure out that 3D wasn't quite what we expected. For instance, I'm at the trough of disillusionment with my home entertainment system right now. So, but then you figure out how it works and you get a little bit more informed and you figure out what's realistic and you figure out how to move the speakers around, maybe buy a new piece of equipment and get the system to work a little bit better based on your landscape. And this finally gives you the productivity you're after. Every piece of technology kind of follows this curve. Hype cycles are a great way to put things into perspective. And what I'd like to suggest to you, if you look at the energy system over its entire time, you can actually say there's a long curve on this hype cycle, and the reality is the best time is actually ahead of us still. So we've had our, the early, well actually if you start left to right, 1900th century, there's, electricity came into being, a couple of people got electrocuted, some places burned down, we got to the peak of the, false expectation, so to speak. We went down into that trough of disillusionment when we had maybe the oil crisis in the 70s, and now we're figuring out how to come out of this and get to sustainability. So if we're doing this work today, the best of what's ahead of us is still to come. What do we do about it right now, and how do we put it in the context of using what's available to us? For the energy system to work really, really well, we need to know where everything is. It's a bottom line. Electricity flows through a very diverse grid. That grid is in some cases overworked, underutilized, ready for refreshment. We need to understand what's happening, and there's all kinds of new technologies coming on board to facilitate that, and they're all at different points in the hype cycle. So if you start left to right, new things coming on, consumer storage, what do I do in my home? Come up the curve a little bit, electric vehicle, charging infrastructure, a little bit more. What did IBM say today? Big data. There's some very big ice machine located just next to me, I'm assuming. But big data, right? What's big data? Big data is big content and lots of information flowing. A part of big data is going to be geospatial information, attaching some context to the information you've got to support the decision making. That's just flowing right along to where do I put what in the grid? When do I put new things into the grid? What type of things do I need in the grid in order to enable the dynamic grid? Finally, it's all going to come down to triple X. I don't know which way we want to interpret that, the triple threat. But the reality is telematics, telemetry, and telecommand. The grid is going to be handling so much data in order to enable the dynamic nature of it in the future. There's going to be distributed control, centralized control, communication, and data. All of it is going to need to know where it came from in order to make sense of it. And all of that's going to need to be automated. So there's a huge opportunity here for innovation, lots of opportunities to build on exciting technologies that are now just starting to emerge. And if you look at that curve there with all those little bits and pieces, all of those will rely in one form or another on geospatial information. All of those dots on that thing have a life cycle that's at least longer than 2 years and possibly up to 10 or 15 years before they come to their full strength. That's the time of the opportunity, if it's of interest to you guys, to get involved with it. And at the end of the day, we're going to try to take the grid out of the simple centralized structure, electricity flowing one way, into a more dynamic model where load follows generation. We're all participating in it, and we have got higher amounts of green renewable energy in it so that we can impact the quality of our life. And I've got 58 seconds coming in the last couple of slides. The biggest trick is going to be what to do. And so everybody's talking about smart grids. Smart grid is the panacea. Smart grid is a collection of many things. Fundamentally, in order to make it all make sense, you need to look at the processes that we're going to need in 5 and 10 years from now, and that's what I'd like to encourage everyone to consider. And when you look at those processes, consider the impact that geospatial information is going to have on them. If we get that right, and we get the right process, we're going to be able to help ourselves actually get a better approach. One of the things we do, and this is the only commercial in it, we look at the processes of the utility of the future. The core ones, I would propose to you the most important one is the bottom right segment is smart asset management. Where are my assets and how are they being used? Which ones are about ready to pop and which ones are underutilized? And what does that mean to the risk of my grid operations and my ability to deliver electricity? If we get it right, though, smart grid, all these technologies, geospatial information are going to be a facilitator of a changing world. It's going to have an impact on all of us, and working on it to optimize it and support its development in an intelligent way around the right processes is going to enhance the ability of us to actually have a strong economy, because we're going to have low-cost, high-quality energy reliability that is finally going to help all of us enhance the quality of our life. So I'd like to just close with those comments as food for thought for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Quick.
Wow.
Quick.
What a great introduction to the whole notion of the geoeconomy from very different perspectives, as you've seen. Just listening to the presentations, I've got a refreshed perspective on the importance of who, what, when, and where, and the ability to use that information now to improve people's lives. So let me turn the floor over to you folks and ask you to field some questions for our folks here. Please. The question was, where is the pull going to come from for the smart grid and related technologies to occur?
So is this mic working? Can you guys hear me? Because it is. Thank you for trying to get that belted out. So I have to say yes, or else I wouldn't be viable in the panel here. But it's not a simple answer. I believe, for me, unfortunately, the thing that will be the trigger is the inevitability of increasing energy costs in total. And I think that's going to be a sensitization point that will bring a higher level of consumer engagement, that will drive new processes into our energy paradigm. Yes? So there's, so the statement made was the price of gas has gone way down. And
that is natural gas.
Natural gas. Natural gas is 2 cents per cubic meter now, roughly, which is the lowest it's been roughly in most people's memories almost, right? And so I almost have to be careful here because I have a personal opinion about that, which is verging on a conspiracy theory, right? I think the point what's going on is that the North American natural gas price is actually disconnected from the global natural gas price, and we probably shouldn't become complacent with the current price. And then it's anybody's crystal ball, how long will that last, right? But there are other influences like climate change, like CO2 reduction, that we need to consider in how we consume fossil fuels and whether or not they're the best thing to be consumed. My perspective is the technology is around the corner that I may be able to fuel my vehicle with sun. Why wouldn't I do that? In fact, I'll go on the record and say I subscribe to the quality of my life is related to the energy I consume, and I will do everything I can actually to consume more energy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has a carbon impact, right? So a solar rooftop and straight into my car, that might not be a bad thing. A hot water solution solar on my house, on my rooftop, and it goes straight into my shower, that might not be a bad thing. And the efficiencies of all of those things are in fact ramping up. I think there's a lot of incentives, the Ontario Green Energy, Green Economy Act, in order to exploit that because of the inevitability of the cost of fuels going up and us needing to prepare for that, right? So it's, unfortunately, energy costs will go up.
Yes, please.
Dr. Ryerson, we talked about a bunch of interesting technologies relating to metadata vehicles interacting with each other, with their surroundings. How long, or first of all, is it possible
That's a great question. I'm going to break that into two parts. I hinted on this briefly, that the technologies to capture the context around the vehicle, to capture information about where the vehicle drives and how aggressively the person drives and where that's happening, the technologies all exist today. And we can see that literally within a year or two in aftermarket form. You can see that today in aftermarket form. The challenge is that next part of the question that you hinted at in terms of autonomous vehicles. And I would argue that the challenge around autonomous vehicles has much more to do with political and society adoption than it has to do with the technology behind it. So the longest hurdle there will not be the technology, but will be the political and societal acceptance of an autonomous vehicle. So yes, technology exists today to enable driver-based feedback, to enable information that you can use to coach and improve your driving behavior. Technology exists today to autonomously drive. The necessary policies and safeguards and regulations that are in need of updating, that's what will drive this. And if you wanted me to guess at that, I'd say 10 years from an autonomous vehicle perspective. Good question.
Other questions? Please.
One, you mentioned the idea of reporting potholes.
Yeah.
Actually, there is an application on Penny called Fix My Street, which we talked about here, co-op. And I think people would find it interesting to know about crowdsourcing, the idea that locations can be used as a way to integrate data and have people report it. Bob might comment on it.
You know, what we've seen happen in a lot of these things is that there's a certain threshold. If you have 3 or 4 people, that people become identified as reliable sources of information. Think TripAdvisor. If after you've put in a certain number of comments, your commentary is naturally accepted. The same thing happens with people that are putting in information for crowdsourcing. In Victoria State in Australia, crowdsourcing is becoming a way of updating maps. And as we see these things happen more and more, there's going to be less and less government making of maps, so much as government simply serving as the portal through which information comes. What's quite fascinating is that this wasn't something that's new. The whole idea of crowdsourcing took place in the 1930s with Sir Dudley Stamp, who was a geographer who got school children to map all of the land in the UK. And that was credited with keeping the UK going, keeping England going during the Second World War, because they were able to decide where to plant food, where to grow food, to provide their own food rather than having to import it, which is what they were doing before the war.
Fascinating. Please, Richard.
Add a comment. I think it hits to the same point. So the picture I showed of the electrical grid today is that kind of linear left to right approach, the future, the dynamic one. A big issue today is electricity companies, utilities will often send trucks out to drive along the lines and look at the lines and look for LEDs that are on or off and try to find faults. New companies, newer innovations today have some sensing technology, and they'll put that in, isolate faults. And this is a true story, and I find it astounding. My kid will sit at home with his BlackBerry Messenger and have probably a faster electricity system outage update than the utility will, because all of his friends' status will go, I'm in the dark, the TV just went off, and within seconds of a failure, with a little bit of sense of location, where these kids are messaging from, you know where the lights are out in our community. It's astounding how the community participation can actually generate new content, right? So in theory, every phone can be set. I mean, this is again the surveillance point of it, but we can know where every phone is, and if your status is lights out, you have your new outage management system for a utility, and it's actually public participation, no money down.
And that'll be work for the Privacy Commissioner for decades to come.
Well, you, get out of here. I just want to tell a couple of stories.
Keep talking.
Okay, just following on from what you guys were saying, we have the modern day example of the 911 service. If you're calling from a landline, the 911 service will know exactly where you're calling from because every landline's attached to a specific location on the Earth's surface. If you're calling on your mobile phone, they're not going to know except within a range of maybe half a kilometer, I don't know exactly what it is, where you are. So that creates problems of its own. So knowing where people are is very important in situations like that. I'd like to relate the story of how we got onto this notion of the Innovation Atlas. It was going back 15 years ago, and at the time we didn't know it, but it was really formed the seed of what we're doing now. We were approached by the Royal Bank of Canada. And the Royal Bank about 15 years ago was setting up its high-tech lending unit. This was the group that was going to lend to fast-growing companies in two areas, ICT and in life sciences. They'd made that decision. The question that they asked was, well, where should we put our people? We can't put them everywhere in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto Area. Where exactly do we put our people? And they realized pretty quickly, well, we want to put them where the companies are. So where are the life sciences companies and where are the ICT companies? At the time, what we did, because the technology had not evolved to the extent it is today, we got a big map of the GTA and we laid it out on the boardroom table. And that gave us our relative positioning, but then the question was, well, where are the companies? So to find out where the companies were, what we did is we got the member lists from various industry associations, the medical device manufacturers and ITAC and this and that. And we would literally put a pin on the map, a red pin for the life sciences companies and a blue pin for the ICT companies, and lo and behold, patterns emerged. The companies were not spread evenly across the GTA. They were very special locations. So the ICT companies were located in Markham and in Mississauga, and the life sciences companies were located in Etobicoke and in downtown Toronto. Well, that was tremendously valuable for the Royal Bank because it told them two things they needed to know. The first, obviously, is where exactly to put their people, but the second one, just as important, is exactly where not to put their people because there's going to be no business there. So that was our introduction, although we didn't know it at the time, to this whole notion of why where matters. Okay, Richard, over to you.
You can turn us all off.
Thank you.
However that happened.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank Ron and the panel, and we have a little appreciation here
Ah, thank you, Richard. Animal, vegetable, or mineral?
Thank you.
for you.
Thank you. Sure.
And second, I would like to thank you, the audience, for sitting with us and talking. I think there was enough conversation here that you have some thoughts to talk about in the next day and a half. These gentlemen will be around. They're quite willing to let you interrupt them over their drink at the reception.
Just hang on. I don't think. Can you hear? Can you hear him? No. Just give him a second. He's trying to get your.
Yell loudly.
Yeah, I'm going to yell real loud because there is a reception taking place, and the lineup for your bar right there is really short, and you have a bar ticket in here. And as I said, these gentlemen will be around, and anything that will promote thought or conversation, please avail themselves to me to find them, or if you can find them, I'm certain they'd be very willing to talk. Bob Ryerson's booth is right down by the Energy Theater at the back, and I bought that book when it first came out, and he signed it for me, so I'm hoping it becomes real famous one day and I can sell it. But I hope you've enjoyed Discovery so far, and please go forth and have a good time.